Welcome back, Curious Hearts. I'm Vera. Together, in every episode, we get to explore what it is we really believe, how we practice, and we get to meet people who are on their own spiritual path. Together, we begin. Hey, y'all. Today, we return to our practice because unless we are returning again and again to these practices, we're just thinking about it, and that's not going to get us where we'd like to be. In the world right now, whenever you are listening or watching this, there is a lot going on. And in the blessing of being in this highly connected world, digital age, is that we have so much information. We get so much stimulation. We have so many ideas. There are so many opportunities for us to connect with each other, learn from each other. But it's also incredibly possible to feel overwhelmed by the volume of information, to simply feel like overstimulated, to be just like too much noise, too much activity, too much. And one of the consequences of that for us is that instead of having a choice about where we're going next or what we're responding to or choosing wise actions, instead of feeling like we have a sense of agency around our life, we feel like we're constantly reacting. Like here's a ding, here's an email, here's this news story, whatever it might be. Then you have your own personal crisis, the personal crisis of the people around you. You're constantly putting out fires. And over time, I think that our nervous system, I can really only speak for myself, that there was a period of time when my nervous system was so highly reactive to everything around me that the idea of slowing down was very challenging. But it also meant that I was sort of a slave to my environment. I was a slave to the information that was happening. I was unable to recognize my own strength, my own power, my own ability to make choices in the world. So one of the ways that we interrupt that pattern of feeling like we're always reacting, that we're always, at the beck and call of the news line, one of the ways we do that is what we did last month, which was to be still, to just stop, sit still, turn everything off, be in the silence and the space. And that is an essential prerequisite for the practice that we are doing today, I think, which is listening. So today we're working through listening practice. I think until we can be with the stillness, with the open space, we can't then begin to receive information, receive stimulation, receive sound or sight or thoughts or words or any of that, unless we can start to clear the field on occasionally, right? Sort of like reset, turn ourselves off and turn ourselves back on again. So once we do that, then one of the things that's really important is to train ourselves about how much we digest, how much we allow the information, the people, the news, the sounds in our environment to throw us off our beam. And the answer is that sometimes it's impossible. Like sometimes we just get knocked down, and that's okay. But if we're always knocked down by everything that comes at us, we begin to feel like we're victims to the world around us, when that is not the case. So the listening practices can take a wide number of forms. This is really an extraordinary and expansive practice, and I am intentionally not calling it a listening meditation because I think there are actually a lot of different ways that we can use this as a spiritual practice. But I think that it is an essentially spiritual skill that we must practice in order to get better at. One of the reasons that we do this kind of listening practice, and we'll do a brief one in a moment, which is just a sort of a wide open space listening, allowing our judgment and evaluation and need to understand the sound that we're receiving fall away and just begin to experience the fullness of the sound. That is the instruction. That is the assignment at its core. And so if you'd like to stop me jibber jabbering, you can just stop now and go do that. If you want to explore with me a little bit, I'm going to explore a little about what this practice does, what it opens us up to both in our day-to-day life, in our spiritual life, what kind of freedom it gives us in the everyday world. And then I have a little gift for you, which is a little recording from my morning walk, which is one of the places that I have this kind of listening meditation, listening practice. So why do we practice listening? Seems obvious. Like, I have ears, Vera. I can hear stuff. I am an expert already. And you are. You are an expert at hearing. But the skill of refining our listening is essential if we want to be less reactive and more responsive, right? So instead of being thrown about, always we're just whatever comes next, we're just doing that next. Any call, any news story, anything that happens in our life hijacks our system. That's what being reactive feels like. It feels like being out of control. So if you're a person who likes to be in control, then that's how I'm going to sell this to you. Listening practice allows you to have more control. The thing that it allows us to do is to let there be that pause in our everyday life so that it gives us the experience of receiving information without reacting to it, right? We're just allowing sound to happen. And it's important, I think, in the same way that we would develop any other skill, that we start with something really benign and really simple, right? Really easy. Like, you're in an empty room, you're out on a walk in the park, wherever you might be, right? Somewhere where you don't feel, threatened. It might even feel a little boring. And that we begin to practice in those more mundane settings. And then we allow ourselves to up the game a little bit, right? So if you were a person like me who's hypersensitive, lots of noise can be really overwhelming. Maybe you don't, walk out into traffic on Times Square and practice listening. That might be too much. But little by little, we add a little bit more until we're able to withstand that much information. And it's just it's just like learning to ride a bike, right? Or practicing yoga or, learning any other skill, right? You don't get it on the first try. The reason that we practice, the reason we come back again and again is because this is something that we want to get better at. And it's not always a straight line forward. Some days it will be easy and you'll just be zen and able to hear whatever is around you and not be thrown off course. And then the next day, every little, noise will send you off on some mental spiral. So it's okay if that happens, first of all. The power of being responsive means that we have a choice in our actions. We have some amount of choice in our emotional responses, our internal emotional responses, and how quickly our nervous system gets activated. Some of that we don't have control over, and that's just part of being a human animal. But listening practice is one of the entry points, I think, into learning how to be less reactive and more responsive to the things around us, to the things that happen in our life. So the next, perhaps most extraordinary gift of this skill of really refined listening is It allows us to be in pure relationship, right? More authentic, non-judgmental, open-hearted relationship with other people. That the first relationship that we can have that open-hearted structure with is ourself. So maybe you've heard people say things like, well, listen to your body, or, listen to your heart. But if you don't have a practice of actually doing that, it doesn't mean anything. And I don't know about you, but like my body doesn't, I mean, we'll talk about a little bit in a second, like the internal sounds versus the outside sounds. But like my body doesn't sound like anything. Like, what does that actually mean? In the practice of slowing down and starting to get skilled in our listening, we become more aware of the subtle shifts or changes that are happening in our inner state. So that might be how you're feeling emotionally. You might get more refined in your emotions so that it's not just like happy, sad, mad, which is what most people, narrow down. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm mad. Maybe there's like a flat, right? Sort of boring. But those are like the big buckets. That the more refined we are in our listening, that means that we have this inner sense of listening and we can get more refined. So we get to like, I'm frustrated. And I can distill both physically and emotionally the difference between frustrated and agitated and annoyed. And if that feels like, well, those are all the same, that's okay. But it is possible for there to be more refinement there. There also can be more refinement in like gleeful, content, delighted. That those are also all three slightly different variations, right, of that like happy kind of energy. That we get this refinement about how we're doing, and underneath that, like, the weather of our mood and our emotions, we get even closer to like to our own curious hearts, right? That there is a whisper, I believe, that is coming from inside of each of us. So if you listen to the episode about finding meaning and you were like, oh, I don't have a clue, like, what is my purpose? What am I doing here? This is one of the most essential practices for you. And I would encourage you to just come back to a listening practice as often as possible. As well as that relationship with ourself, building an honest and authentic and intimate relationship with ourself. We also are able to be more present with others. And we all know what it's like to feel heard, right? When you talk, especially when you're sharing something that's really important to you, whether it's something that's really exciting that happened or something that's really heavy, something you're really worried about, when we feel heard, there is an affirmation that is coming from the other person. And this listening practice gives us the skill to really hear other people and to allow other people to feel heard, to feel affirmed and really validated. So if you're not interested in making people feel that way, okay. It is my hope in almost every interaction that the other person will feel really heard and seen by me. If we take this relationship one more step further, this is a place where a lot of folks on a spiritual adventure want to get to, which is they're like, I want to hear, I want to hear messages. I want to be able to know, there are lots of ways of putting this, know what God's plan is for me. I want to develop a relationship with my spiritual guides. We talked with Priya last time about having this really intimate relationship with what in Santana Dharma is called the Ishtadevata, but you're sort of your closest God friend, we'll call it. And that relationship is not a one-way relationship, right? It is a true exchange. And I will confess, I guess, I don't know that I've talked about this much publicly, but my personal relationship with the divine is with actually an infinite number of beings, not with one infinite being. And so when I pray, I often start my prayers with y'all. Hey, y'all. Okay. And for me, that not only makes it a little bit more playful, but it allows that divine energy, the mystery, to be more understandable to my like tiny human brain. So it's great for me to be in contact with them, to be in conversation, but conversation is both ways. So if I never shut up and listen, I am missing out. And one of my favorite definitions actually of prayer and meditation is that prayer is when we ask questions, when we ask for and ask, the divine of, ask things of the divine. And meditation is when we receive the answers. So if we haven't figured out how to pick up that phone and hear what it is, what those messages are, we're missing out. So listening practices are, again, essential to that. And then the last two things are related and are really just about, frankly, enjoying being alive. As we practice listening and as we get more skillful, we become more sensitive. I think we become more sensitive not just in this sense, right? But also in our other senses. And you can take this exact listening practice and map it onto any of your other senses. I find that visual meditations, like looking at something, can be really challenging because we live in such a visual world and the eyes are so externally seeking. There's something about listening that is an invitation. We're sort of receiving and digesting information rather than going out to it. So that's why I like starting with listening. But the more sensitive we become, the richer our life is. The more vibrant colors are. We talked already about the expansiveness of our own inner state and our awareness to our inner state. But, flavors become more explosive. Good things and bad things, like things that we like and things that we don't like, get more both diverse and more intense. And at the same time, we are not bowled over, right? So it's like turning up the volume, but not being like totally shattered by that all the time. And that really just improves our quality of life on a day-to-day basis. And it completely eliminates any quality of boredom. And in a world that is really being driven by attention, where our eyeballs and our earballs, that's not a word, are constantly being fought over, between streaming services and social media and, our children and our animals and our friends and our work. And it's like everybody wants our attention. That this allows us to step back from all of that partially, but it also means that like we're not constantly seeking like junk food for our attention. It means that we can have a more authentic relationship and a more honest, like wholesome, even humble relationship with all of the information and the experiences that we're digesting. That's getting a little frou-frou. So we're going to jump into the practice now. But I wanted to give you a little bit of a framework for why we do this, what kind of possibilities it has in your life, and to sort of help you understand why it's so important. So I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of instruction. So if you're in a place right now where you can just stop everything, if you're driving, please don't, you can do it while you're driving. But I prefer to start where you don't have any other stimulus coming in. You can just be present in what you hear. At the very end of the podcast today, I'll share a longer clip of, again, the sounds of what it's like to be out in nature. So if you'd like a slightly tastier experience, that will come for you too, and I'll include that in a chapter. So if you want to just fast forward to that, you're welcome to that too. So as we begin, just make yourself comfortable. And if you're feeling sleepy or down, something like that, I encourage you to sit up. Sit comfortably. You can sit with something behind you. You can sit cross-legged. You can sit in a chair with your feet on the floor. If you're feeling awake and alive and like you could lay down and not fall asleep, you could lay down and be present and awake but at ease, please feel free to do that. Yoga teacher hack for that is if you lay down, bend your knees and plant your feet. Or stretch your arms up over your head when you lay back. Both of those will send the body the message that like this is not nap time. This is just quiet time. So as you've made yourself comfortable, I encourage you, if it feels okay for you, to close your eyes. Because as we start to get more skillful in our listening, we want to focus on that sense. So that means that we close our eyes and we start to withdraw the other senses to allow what we hear to get a little louder, for it to draw our focus. So just begin by becoming aware of your body. You might find that your body is drawing some of your attention too. So if there's any way that you can shift or adjust that will make you just a little more comfortable, please feel free to do that. And then begin to feel the sensations in your ears. Can you feel the ridges of the ears, your earlobes, the conch, that little cup in the back of the ear? And imagine now that you're softening the whole organ of the ear, letting the inner ear soften and widen. So that you become a receptacle, you become a listening, open heart, pure channel for what you hear around you. You may have already started to notice some things. Perhaps there's some whirring or humming in your environment. Perhaps something in the same room or in another room. Maybe you hear something just outside. And maybe you notice that as you hear specific sounds, noises, there is an innate desire to figure out what they are, to judge them. Maybe you hear something in your room or in the house that's making noise that's a little too loud, and so now you're trying to diagnose it and think about the people you need to call to get that fixed. If that's happened, it's okay. But just release your need to do anything about what you hear. And just hear it. And as you're present with the sounds around you, see if you can receive all of them equally. Allowing there to be a sort of soundscape in your environment. So we simply allow the sounds to be received and sensed. And we let go of our need to change them. We begin to release our grip around our preference for different kinds of sounds, needing for anything about the sound to change. We just allow. Begin perhaps to marvel even that we can distinguish multiple sounds around us. And we can also allow every single one of them to be existing. Each one like an instrument in a symphony, the whole orchestra coming together purely for our reception, for us to hear. And then begin again to draw your awareness and your listening inward, not rejecting any of the sounds around you, but instead redirecting your attention to the sounds on the inside of your own body. So one of the easiest ways to do this is to swallow once or twice, and to hear the sound of the swallow deep in your ears. Begin to hear the sounds of your breath. Maybe you hear the subtlety of your breath on the inside. Perhaps in time you'll be able to hear the blood that is rushing through your veins and arteries just next to your ears. Or even hearing that nada sound, that background inner tone that exists for all of us. And then begin to expand again to the sounds around you, hearing both your inner sounds and the sounds in your environment. And just be here for a moment. Slowly allow yourself to return to your other senses, letting them come back online, maybe moving your fingers or your toes. Again, perhaps you swallow before you blink your eyes open again. I want you to take a moment to just reflect on what that was like. Was it easy? Did you find yourself getting distracted? Were you ready to move on to the next thing? Have you already skipped the podcast and got on to the next thing in your queue? Perhaps in this round, you found yourself getting sleepy, or maybe there's enough sound around you, or as you were more sensitive to the sounds, you might have had a moment of starting to feel a little overwhelmed, like realizing how much is already here, even when there's not a lot going on. We begin to experience the vast availability of presence in every moment. We realize how much is here for us if we are willing to choose to stay present rather than to be called all over the place. There is about 6% of the population, I think, who have a condition or a hypersensitivity that's called synesthesia. And I sometimes wonder if all of us can't cultivate that synesthetic quality. What synesthesia is you're in your brain, in your wiring, your senses get connected. So often what that looks like is that people have, they connect sounds. They like see colors when certain sounds happen. Or when they, look at a particular shape or color, they hear it at the same time that they see it. Any kind of overlap between those sensual awareness is called synesthesia. I believe that there is a sensitivity that is allowed for us when we begin to develop one of our senses. So, for example, people who lose their ability to see, we know their sense of sound, their sense of hearing gets much, much more vivid. And conversely, same thing, people who are deaf, right, or who have an illness and lose their ability to hear, their other senses, right, their tactile sense often gets much more sensitive. This is not a limitation. This is, in fact, something that all of us can cultivate and develop with time and practice. So that allows us to become hypersensitive, hyper aware. It allows us to expand how much information we're getting from just this space around us. And in a world that's almost overwhelming us with information, that might sound like a bad thing. But this is what it actually does. It begins to expand our capacity so that the more sensitive we can be, we are receiving that information all the time. We just become skillful at receiving information, right? Our sensory information, and then that, folds into, ideas and thoughts and news and all of that, events. We become what is possible, right? Which is to become more sensitive and less affected. Because as we get this broader expanse of experience, one little experience inside of that is not going to throw us off course as much. And also, when we practice in this way, we can practice both disengaging, right? That intentional activity of like, stop judging what's happening. You don't need to fix it. You don't need to change it. You can just allow it to be what it is, right? That's number one. So when somebody comes at you with a whole lot of information, right? Your coworker comes at you with like a long list and they're like, bullet pointing all of the things that need to happen. And it's going very quickly and it's getting louder and louder and louder. You have this skill of being able to be like, oh, there is noise happening. Not saying that you're not listening to them, but that you can begin to distinguish the signal from the noise because you've practiced a little bit of detangling, a little detachment from that information, that sensory information. And we also can practice being more richly connected to all of the things, right? When we begin to fold in our inner sound and the sound around us, this extraordinary thing happens where suddenly we are part of the whole. We are deeply connected. Every moment has as much potential and promise for us as any other moment. And that, again, just leads to this deeper and richer sense of being alive. It allows us to connect more deeply to ourselves and to each other, and to find the blessings that are here for us, and to also be able to respond to information that comes with a more complete picture of everything that's happening instead of just the one loudest thing that's right in front of us. So truly, I believe that this listening practice is one of the most extraordinary ones. As you can imagine, there are a lot of ways to play with it. And if you'd like to go on from here, again, I'll leave you with the miraculous soundtrack of Wisner, the Wisner Tract at City Park in New Orleans. But you might also start to experiment with doing this in a crowd of people who are all talking to each other, to see if you can stop listening to the words and trying to make sense of the words and figure out what's going on, and instead just receive all of the sounds of the voices around you. From there, you might find yourself listening to music. And live music, I think, is really special for this kind of practice because there's always more around you than just the music, right? So you can receive and experience the music and also all of the other sounds that are happening inside and outside the space where you are, and also your own inner world. And suddenly, the music is a dance that's happening with this moment. It's this constant, rich tapestry that we get to experience. And it allows us to be with ourselves more deeply and to be with others more deeply. So with that, I will leave you at the Wisner Tract in New Orleans. And if there's anything about this practice that has been tricky or challenging for you, please feel free. If it's appropriate to share it in the comments, if you'd like to send me a message, please, you can message me on Substack or on my website or on Instagram. And if I can support you in your practices, I would be honored to do that. So I'm available for you. Take great care and enjoy.